We start with the Republican from Nebraska, Congressman Don Bacon, with us once again here on the Hill Sunday. Congressman, thanks for being with us today. Always nice to see you. Appreciate it, sir. Yeah, so you've had a busy few days there in your hometown in Omaha. You met with business leaders the other day, as I understand it, and you told them that we're not asking really for more tax cuts. You said you're just trying to keep the tax code level. I want to look forward here, right? Because obviously the first 100 days was very consequential for the president, but really these upcoming months could be just as important for him. He made a lot of promises out on the campaign trail. No tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, and more. While you talk about just a level tax code and extending it, are you going to be able to deliver on, and Republicans, all those things that the president outlined out on the trail?
Well, we're working on it when it comes to no tax on tips and reducing taxes on retirement. I think most people would like that. But the most important thing we can do is extend the current tax code. Not asking for deeper cuts to S corporations or personal taxes. But if we do nothing and this expires, the average American is going to get a 20% tax increase. In Nebraska, that comes out to about $1,600 a year. So it's very important that we get these taxes extended. If we can find a way to afford the no taxes on tips and retirement, I know we're working on it, but it's a matter of how much we can cut to make room for those tax increases.
So you don't think that's you don't think that's a given, the no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime?
It's a given that we're trying, but we're also debating how much to cut from like Medicaid, right? I have found $500 billion we can save where most Americans would support it. But we have folks in our conference want to do $880 billion, and they have to show us how this will not impact Medicaid or the people on it, that it's not undermining the safety net that President Trump says he wants to protect. So those kind of things we've got to work out.
So on Medicaid, right, because the framework that Republicans set up to even have this discussion, as you mentioned, potentially calls for north of $800 billion in Medicaid cuts. Could. The president says that he's in favor of getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. But if there are cuts to Medicaid, do you have a red line, Congressman? And if so, what is that?
Well, the red line is not to undermine Medicaid for those who need it. And we want to keep our hospitals alive and well. We can't afford to have hospitals closing. So when you look at work requirements for able-bodied adults with no children, if you do that, and you still can get Medicaid if you have a job, but you got to have a job if you're an able-bodied adult with no children or seeking a job or seeking a skill. That's over $200 billion in savings, according to the Congressional Budget Office. If you do a eligibility check every year, and we have not done one in 5 years, by the way, for Medicaid. If you do a periodic eligibility check for those who are on Medicaid, you also save hundreds of billions of dollars. If you ensure that only legal people in our country are on the rolls of Medicaid, you also save more money. So I've been able to find roughly $500 billion in savings where most Americans would agree this is right? But if you go beyond that, you've got to prove to me and a lot of other people and to the president that's not hurting Medicaid for those who need it.
Okay, $500 billion and beyond. All right, so you have a pretty. I want to move you to tariffs because that's obviously one of the other big stories. You have a pretty famous constituent there in Omaha, Nebraska, who made some news this weekend for our audience. I want to show it. Watch.
In the United States, I mean, we should be looking to trade with the rest of the world, and we should do what we do best, and they should do what they do best. Trade should not be a weapon.
All right, so that obviously Warren Buffett in your hometown yesterday as he was speaking to investors. Trade should not be a weapon. But during the NewsNation Cuomo town hall this week, President Trump talked up the positives of tariffs. Here was him.
I just think that I'll be able to convince people how good this is. This is what other countries have done to us. We've been the laughing stock and the whipping post. I have to be flexible because as you do things in life and in business, you need flexibility.
Do you think the president needs to take a cue from Warren Buffett, Congressman?
Yes. I'm a traditional Republican. Republicans have not supported protectionism since 1930s, and it didn't work well for us back then. We've learned that free trade, it should be fair. I agree with the president on that. We should always seek fair trade, but free trade is optimal. That's how you get the best services, the best product at the best price. You get it in the most efficient manner possible, and the consumers, citizens benefit from that. It also keeps our businesses sharp when we compete globally And that's how we became the world superpower, was through this mindset. And I don't mind having reciprocal tariffs if someone is abusing, but we should negotiate it. And our goal should be to get to a free trade environment. That is a traditional Republican thinking. That we've had this thinking since World War II. And I find it ironic that we have members in our party now going back to 1930s. And I also find it interesting that Democrats have suddenly found a free trade ideology. You know, in the 70s, they were more for protectionism. So we do have a mixed match going on in our ideologies, which is, there's a whole book there to be written.
Let me ask you about Nebraska, your state, because you're one of the top 5 ag exporters in this country. Soybeans, beef, corn, feed grains, all over $1 billion annually. One of the news items from the president this week was he gave a little bit of a reprieve to the auto industry. You'll remember in the first quote-unquote trade war in the first term, it was the farmers who got $29 billion from the president in relief. Does he need to jump in for the ag community this time around?
Well, the ag community is very worried. You know, if you talk to the Farm Bureau, the cattlemen, I've talked to some of our biggest meat producers here for beef. They're already getting their markets shut off. So we're already seeing impact on our exports in Nebraska, where we've lost market access in Europe primarily, like particularly with our beef and popcorn and things like that. So we're going into a recession in the Midwest farm community. The commodity prices are low. Input prices are high. By the way, we import a lot of these input, like our fertilizers and herbicides and things like that. And so our farmers are really struggling right now. And we have to get relief on tariffs, or we're going to have to help them out financially like we did last time. I think we'd be better off trying to open trade doors versus doing tariffs.
So what's the time frame there, as you see it, in your home state, as to how much longer this can last?
I think it needs to be settled this summer. We need to get this thing settled this summer, or our farmers will be struggling. We'll be in a recession here in the Midwest, bottom line.
By this summer, you believe?
Yes.
Okay. I mentioned you're a retired brigadier general. You served for 29 years for the United States military, Congressman. There was some big news this week on sort of the national security front. You were the first Republican to call for Pete Hegseth to leave at the Pentagon. And the president decided to shake up this week sort of part of his national security team. Mike Waltz, no longer the national security advisor, nominee now to the United Nations. And instead, Marco Rubio is taking on that role in addition to his role as the Secretary of State. Are you comfortable right now as a Republican who sees the team around the president, are you comfortable with the president's team as you see it today?
Well, I'm very comfortable with Mike Waltz. I'm also very comfortable with Marco Rubio. I supported Marco Rubio in 2016. I think he's got a very level head. He's a good guy to have in the White House. I think he's a strong voice. Henry Kissinger had both the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of State position. I doubt this will be long-lived, frankly, but for the short order, I think we'll be fine. I think Mike Waltz will do a great job in the United Nations. Both these guys have the confidence of the 95% or 99% of Republicans, and I dare say many Democrats also have the confidence of both these people. So I think the president's in good hands with Marco Rubio, and I believe Mike Waltz will do a great job at the United Nations.
And where are you real quick on Hegseth right now?
Well, that's sort of water in the bridge. I spoke my mind. What I fear about him was he made a mistake on that signal chat. He put classified information 2 hours before a strike on the Houthis. We call it operational security. It was an OPSEC violation. All you really need to do is come clean and say, I did wrong, and take responsibility. That's what you want leaders to do. And none of us are perfect. You got to take responsibility. But when he attacked the media, denied there was a problem, and even I don't think was being honest about it, what that does is that hurts his credibility. And the Secretary of Defense has to have credibility. And I feel like he hurt his credibility here.
We'll leave it there. Congressman Don Bacon is a Republican from the state of Nebraska with us once again here on the Hill Sunday. Thank you, sir. Have a great rest of your weekend.